Stuart Young, thank you so much for joining us, or continuing to be with us here, Stuart. And for part two here, we're going to look at what is good about the UK being independent. What is the essential nuts and bolts of why we should be outside of this European Union?
There's a list of reasons. Could be here all night if you want them. But my big one is essentially self-determination. We are bound by a lot of European regulations. I mean, I'll just quickly point this out. The European Union Directive on pillowcases has more pages in it than the US Declaration of Independence. I mean, that's how much snowballing, avalanching legislation is piled on us, and people don't really realise how the constraints on our country and the businesses to. It's anti-trade, it's anti-business, it's suppression, in my opinion. So self-determination. There are budgetary constraints on all member state governments. If you're a socialist, a proper socialist who believes in the means of production and the ownership of the state, you can't be a socialist country. Not that I advocate for socialism myself. You can't be a full-on socialist in name country, because we are partially socialist in my opinion anyway. But like, you can't nationalise the railways. So Corbyn for me is playing the game of, I'll pretend to be a Remainer, even though I'm a Brexiteer, because I know that if I want to nationalise the railways, nationalise everything, can't do it in the European Union. Okay. Then you got the other side. My position of this, of course, this is still sticking with self-determination. I'd love to see a low tax, low regulation economy. Let business thrive. Let people make something of themselves. Allow social mobility to come along. If you wanted radical sweeping tax cuts and the knocking away of the size of the government, the unseen government, you can't do that either. You're constrained. You've got budget constraints. There are things you have to meet under the European Union. So if you want more of the same, vote to stay in the European Union or push for it. If you want serious change on either the left or the right, I mean, personally, I'd go for the proper right is small government, low taxation. Then we have to leave. So that's just the self-determination factor. You've got financial costs, which are astronomical. The European Union.
Maybe we can. Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe we could dive into some of the financial costs. Can you give us any details of the general money flow from the UK to the EU?
It's around about 50 million a week we pass over from the Treasury to the European Union. That's just from the government. There's a lot of money going around from other parts, because if you understand, people have said the United States government has got quite a bit of a corruption in it because of the size of it. So if business wants to buy influence, it's the best investment they can make. The European Union is exactly the same. Because the legislators of the European Union aren't elected, so they're not accountable, they're appointed. So these people who propose the legislation the European Union makes, if I was a big business, a big corporation that wanted a certain policy coming through, a little brown paper package wouldn't be a bad investment, you know. And right. The money swimming around there is the lobbying money is outrageous.
So it's a fact then that the UK is a net contributor to the EU, whereas some other nation states, if we can call them that, within the 28 current members of the EU, enjoy being net beneficiaries. Is it true to say that the accounts, if you like, of the EU, the whole mechanism of government, has never actually been audited? Is it transparent, or what's the situation with the accounting?
They've been audited. They're audited every year.
Okay.
They've never passed an audit. The auditors won't sign it off their books.
Okay.
There's discrepancies everywhere.
Okay. So that's not really a good track record, is it? If you or I...
It'd be like you lending me some money to do something on your behalf, and I only deliver half the job, and then you ask to see where I spent the money, and I don't tell you.
Right, okay. So the door well and truly open for corruption there then, doesn't that sound great? Can you tell us anything about the implications for the EU on things like the fishing industry and if not specifically about the fishing industry, other industries that are interfered with, if I can use that word, by the extra layer of bureaucracy above our own government?
Obviously, as an island, which is the UK, we should have a thriving fishing industry, and we did have a thriving fishing industry. We're now down to about, I think it's 50,000 fishermen. It's something off. It's a low amount, and the coastal communities of the country are in complete deprivation. And we have our fishing waters fished by everybody in the European Union, and our quota of the fish, and obviously we throw a lot of dead fish back as well, is minuscule. And then we've got farmers being paid here in the UK by the European Union to grow nothing, because of the way it's set up. So it'll be farmed out and we import it all.
What are the implications about the EU debt? I don't know what the number is. I think Pete mentioned it was something in the order of 22 trillion euros, but the figure not really being important. The fact that there's a lot of debt there. What do you know what implication that has for our being part of the EU, and how does that speak to the case for independence?
Debt's everywhere. The whole system's built on debt, which is another reason why I'm personally involved in politics. I mean, I look at just the UK situation, and I'm aghast at how bad things are. It's a debt-based system. The European Union's no different. The euro is designed to fail, and the debt is a millstone around the people to keep them down, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
Debt servitude, and the European Central Bank performs exactly the same role, if not worse, than our own Bank of England.
Is it true, Stuart, that MEPs are relatively powerless? In that they're very different from our members of Parliament in the UK government and the Parliament buildings at Westminster, and is it true to say that it's essentially a talking shop which presents as kind of a veneer of accountability? You mentioned the legislation is proposed by these, it's commissioned by private individuals essentially that are appointed. So what's the level of power of MEPs? How much accountability do we really have?
It's actually worse than even being a talking shop. There are no legislative powers from the members of European Parliament. They vote all the time on everything, going from how much orange juice can have concentrated. They avalanche everything. The amount is unbelievable. So basically, what most MEPs do, I'm speaking to a couple of MEPs, is that they don't read what they're voting on. They have research assistants who will advise them how to vote, and these research assistants obviously are politically minded in the same way they are, and they vote in block without knowing what they're voting on, because there's that much legislation coming through. So it's even worse than them just being a presentable face of democracy, because in 99% of instances, they just vote blind.
It sounds pitiful, doesn't it? So,
just to finish the point that
yes,
I think you were really asking is that they have zero legislation making power. So the actual policy that's come through the European Union is done from people who aren't accountable to the electorate whatsoever. So the members of the European Parliament, if they wanted to put anything forward, they can't put a bill forward. They can only make a request to those that have the legislative making powers.
How else would being a sovereign nation, if the United Kingdom were truly master of its own destiny once again, and had we managed to cut free of this avalanche of pointless and legislation that swamps us every year from the EU, how do you see us gaining? What are the key advantages that you can see when you look to that projected possible future of an independent UK?
Well, in relation to obviously the last question as well, the accountability becomes more real. I don't like our electoral setup. I think that's designed to not be accountable as well. But at least we can, in theory, elect our own government. Even in practical terms, it's very difficult. At the moment, our legislation makers, we can't elect. We technically have the ability to do that if we left the European Union, and the accountability to the electorate becomes a lot more important.
Yeah.
They can't make the excuses. Well, we didn't want to do that, but we're going to do it. We have to do it because we're members of the European Union, which has been going on for the last 20, 30 years.
Can you shed some light on, for example, the UKIP's plans for defence policy if we're separated from the European superstate?
The UKIP's position would be to we stay a member of NATO, keep making our payments there. Donald Trump's obviously pushing that hard because we've got these bogeymen we have to defend our country against. But that's another subject. The European Union Army, they definitely want to push this forward. So we will have unelected people who can then control the armed forces of a vast continent. That scares the bejesus out of me. I don't know about anybody else,
yeah.
Especially when you look at the West's policy in the Middle East and other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. That frightens me, the implications of that is something that everybody on all political persuasions need to be made aware of.
I agree. I mean, that's really gives cause for grave concern. So, are there any other aspects, if you like, of UKIP policy that you want to talk about in relation to, this making the case for independence?
There needs to be a cultural change, in my opinion, and I think it's underway. There's a culture war being fought on the internet, which thank you for your part in that as well. The internet needs to be kept free. The Copyright Directive and Article 13 from the European Union could really hinder that. And if we have our government held accountable for the decisions they make, perhaps we can keep internet freedom, which they probably don't want, because dissenting voices are very much gaining popularity, and the culture does have to change in a way that the bending the knee to certain forms for certain ideologies is something that seriously needs to change. And the people at the bottom, in my experiences, I'm going around knocking doors, and if you're not talking about Brexit, which happens, you do get people who are telling me that my 5-year-old got asked if I wanted to, if my 5-year-old got asked if they thought they were born in the right body. So we got the unseen government, so this wing of it called Ofsted, asking children about possibly changing their gender, and parents are worried, and it only seems to be the people at the bottom, who mainly were the Brexit voters in the first place, who are showing any resistance, but they don't really have anyone to turn to in that regard, because the people in authority all around the country and in Europe wide seem to have the alternate view that these things should be put forward, and this is good, and if you oppose this, you're an evil anti-transgender person or something. But these are children. And that's one aspect of a lot of aspects of this dangerous ideology the left are pushing, and this is where UKIP comes in, because we won't put up with it. We will say no, enough's enough, and we'll make the case for traditional values.
Yeah, absolutely.
And science, science, the biological determination of what your gender is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, gender is another whole topic, isn't it? A whole area of arguably insanity that's sweeping our culture. So, by way of some kind of summary, then, do you think we will get a Brexit? And maybe you could explain a little bit of your thinking both ways. What do you think the outcome might be? I know you have no crystal ball, by the way, but
the political will is no. The public will is yes. The fight is who's going to win. The political setup, the structure of the politics probably means the political will is going to win, because the media are certainly doing their best to assist with that. Will there be a Brexit? Not with a Conservative or Labour or Liberal Democrat or Green or SNP government.
That does sound very likely. Well, once again, Stuart, thank you so much for helping to shed some light on this. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing on behalf of UKIP, or about any possible upcoming election, or anything really? Is there anything that you think that needs to be put out there?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind a quick word.
Yes.
Message to two groups of people. First of all, if you're a Brexiteer, the one thing government politicians want more than anything, more than their little brown paper packages and everything like that, is your vote. If you want them scared, if you want them worried, you have to take votes away from them and vote for people that are going to be standing up for Brexit if you're a Brexiteer. Secondly, to another group of people that might watch your channel, Nigel, I subscribe to Austrian School of Economics. I believe in sound money. I won't bend the knee to lefty progressivism. If people in your who watch your channel and other channels feel the same way, the only way you're going to make change is to unite politically, in my opinion. It's why I'm in politics, not the main reason. Well, it is. I joined basically when we did quantitative easing. That brought me into politics in 2009. But without people, you guys do a great message online. It's brilliant. You're waking people up. But we need people in politics to have the same approach, and we need to get people elected. And we're trying to get a few of those people elected this time around in council. And I think things can only change if the people who are the legislative makers change with them and represent the people.
Yeah.
So that's in closing. That's what I wanted to say.
Excellent. And if anybody wanted to contact you, for example, potentially to ask you any further questions, are you happy to be contacted? And would you want to share any details or details of your local UKIP branch?
Yeah, I'm setting up a Facebook page for my candidacy for mayor in Leicester. So please feel free to add a link if you want, Nigel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be putting a link below. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us once again, Stuart. I really appreciate you helping to shed some light on this complex issue. And thank you for listening. And I hope you've all got some value. And I hope you all are getting a clearer picture in contrast to the bias of the mainstream. Yes, we're looking at a counter argument, but the difference is we're not pretending to be unbiased. We're giving a rational presentation, but we are presenting some of the arguments here that you won't hear in the mainstream, and it's entirely up to you people out there to think for yourselves and weigh up the advantages. Do we want where we're going with the Lisbon Treaty, and I recommend you look into that, do we really want to stay a part of this European superstate? And thank you, Stuart, for presenting some of the, bringing some clarity as to the argument for why we should perhaps be seriously considering, no, we don't want to be part of that insanity. Great stuff. Thank you so much for listening.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Nigel, and keep up the good work.
Cheers.
Love forever. Universal cause. Love forever. Because my freedom is yours. Love forever. Rise and be man. Extraordinary.